AM 1480 WLEA.
2 segments today and 3 guests on this Monday, Martin Luther King Day, January 19, 2015. Our first guest will be Demetrius Minor. He'll be talking about Martin Luther King Jr. In segment 2, we'll have Steuben County Sheriff Dave Cole and State Police Sergeant Jim Feeley talking about drugs in Steuben County and the Drug Tip Line and the Drug Tip Line website.
Next on News Talk, AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show with Kevin Doran.
It's Brian O'Neill filling in for Kevin Doran. Monday, Martin Luther King Day here in segment 1. We have on the line with us from Atlanta, Georgia, Demetrius Minor. He's a member of Project 21. We've had a lot of their spokesmen on. He's also a pastoral assistant at a church in Atlanta, and he's a former White House intern from the Bush administration. I'm guessing that's George W. Bush, right, Demetrius?
Absolutely. I probably was a little bit too young to intern for number 41.
And welcome to the show. He's written for the Washington Times, FreedomWorks, and townhall.com. Wanted to talk about, in this segment, Dr. Martin Luther King. From reading your writings online, it seems that you're a big fan of MLK.
Sure, absolutely.
And what is it about Martin Luther King Jr. that interests you?
Well, there's several things. Obviously, his push for racial harmony and for equality and for justice. But as someone who is involved avidly in church ministry, of course, the faith of Martin Luther King Jr. appeals to me as well. A lot of people do not separate King, the preacher, from King, the activist. And if you ever go to Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is the church that he used to pastor, you will not hear any of his sermons. You will not hear any of his speeches or his remarks at the Selma March or I Have a Dream speech, but you will hear his sermons. And I like how he intertwined faith with the call for social justice. So those are some things about MLK that are compelling.
A reading from an essay here that you wrote, you strive to embrace Dr. King's agenda and march towards morality, righteousness, purity, and leadership. Our culture these days is too entrenched in sexuality, individualism, greed, and selfishness, and we're in desperate need of a voice that will not only impact today's youth, but will also affect generations to follow. Tell us about that.
Well, basically what I was saying was that in today's culture, in today's time, and it has a lot to do with politics, it has a lot to do with media, it has a lot to do with greed. In essence, there's a lot of focus on individuality. Basically, what can one person do to benefit themselves instead of looking at the grand scope of, helping our neighbor, helping those in need. And so when you compare it to what Martin Luther King stood for, he was trying to help everyone, upward mobility for everyone. And these days, it's just mostly what can people get out of it for themselves. So when you compare and contrast the eras, you do see that the shift is geared towards the individual instead of people collectively.
You also write, Dr. King had a wise approach to politics. He simply stated, quote, I feel someone must remain in the position of non-alignment so he can look at objectively at both parties and be the conscience of both. That's a great quote.
Well, he definitely wanted both parties to be held accountable. And some people are under the persuasion that he aligned himself a certain way. But if you look at his teachings and if you look at his actions, he demanded accountability from both sides of the aisle. And effectively, he was able to make a difference and to be persuasive with people of multiple political persuasion. He was, of course, he was against the war in Vietnam. And, of course, he pushed for legislation such as the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which, of course, at that time were very tense political and cultural issues. So he himself was apolitical, but because of the influence that he had, he was able to make a difference in the political spectrum as well.
You know, when you look over the I Have a Dream speech, he talks about the bad check and no rest until the African Americans get their rights. He strongly discouraged any sort of violent protests, encouraged harmony between the races, spoke out against the white-only signs that you would have seen in the South in the 1960s. He gave that speech in 1963. Demetrius, what part of the MLK message strikes you the most, and what should we remember the most about Martin Luther King on this day?
That's actually a very difficult question. There's so many aspects of MLK that's to be admired and that's to be embraced. A quote that comes to my mind, and there's many of them, but a quote that he said that really has stuck with me is when he said that he has decided to stick with love because hate is too big a burden to bear. And I think that especially in today, especially when you, in retrospect, when you think of events, you think of the Eric Garner case, you think of the Ferguson, Missouri case, you think of Trayvon Martin case, cases that are very emotional and that have caused race relations to be tense, for lack of a better word. You think of the violence and the protesting that has surmounted due to the event. When you think about when King had the nonviolent approach, because he said, you know, if we hate someone, you know, that prevents us from healing. That prevents us from moving forward. More so the person who perpetrated the crime or the act against it. So that is one quote that really sticks in mind. And you know, to hate someone or to hold a grudge against someone is really not worth it because it only makes the matter worse. Out of the many quotes, and there's many great ones, but that is one that definitely sticks with me.
Demetrius Minor from Project 21, and we can see your articles online. What's the best website to direct people to, Demetrius?
Well, actually, you can direct them to DemetriusSpeaks.com. And also, my first book is coming out April the 28th, Preservation and Purpose. And you can find more information at Balcony 7. That's balcony with the number 7.com.
Balcony7, the number 7.com. Demetrius Minor, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Brian, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Steuben County Sheriff Dave Cole and Sergeant Jim Feeley coming up next. Here in segment 2 on the Newsmaker Show today on this MLK Day 2015. In the studio, Steuben County Sheriff Dave Cole and State Police Sergeant Jim Feeley. Sheriff Cole, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sergeant Feeley, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, we wanted to talk in this segment about the sheriff's efforts to fight drugs in Steuben County and the state police efforts to do the same. Sheriff, you're trying to raise money to put up signs and information to get the word out there about your drug tip hotline. You have a phone line and a website, drug tip website. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we've developed a drug tip website and drug tip line last year when I came into office. The first thing I wanted to attack was I felt the biggest problem in Steuben County was drugs. And so I developed these websites and drug tip line with the district attorney's office and also the chiefs of police in Steuben County and the state police. We're all kind of working together on it. And what it's done so far is we were able to develop from the public information on illicit narcotics sales in the county. And we've actually hit some houses that the undercover narcotics team hasn't been able to get to. We've been able to hit some houses and make some arrests on heroin, bath salts, and methamphetamine on 3 different locations in Hammondsport, Lindley, and actually the village of Addison.
So, Sergeant Feeley, the state police and how they work with the sheriff's department in this fight against drugs locally.
Our working relationship with Sheriff Cole is exceptional as an agency, and we're very encouraged to be involved with the sheriff's department, invited into some of these investigations to share the knowledge that we have, combine it with the knowledge that the sheriff's department has to work on this drug initiative. It's very important to share information as far as information that's out there, the intelligence regarding these drug activities. We have some of it. The Sheriff's Department patrols have some of it, and I think it's very important to compare notes, if you will, when we take on these kind of investigations. So I think it's important that we work together, and so far it's worked very well, our relationship with the Sheriff's Department.
Throwing this question out to either Sergeant Feeley or Sheriff Cole, the bigger problem these days, illegal prescription drugs, which is a lot more common these days than I think it used to be, or the street drugs?
That would be a hard one to call. I would say each are a real issue in our community.
I would agree with that. We see trends where one might outpace the other, but they're both a prominent problem in the community. Prescription drug abuse, illicit drugs, polydrug. Some drug users use both, and it's typical to see that. The abuse of drugs is pretty indiscriminate. It's opportunistic, if you will. People will abuse and sell and be involved in all kinds of drugs. So I don't think either one, takes center stage. They're both a problem.
The newer drug out there that we've heard a lot about in the last couple of years is bath salts. Wondering, are you dealing with a lot of addicts out there who are on bath salts, and what are bath salts users like? Sheriff Cole.
We are still dealing with a lot of cases. We've had some recent cases. In fact, one of the grabs we made from the tip line was a house in Hammondsport, actually, in the town around Hammondsport, Urbana, where we had someone actually with a large stock of bath salts and hypodermic needles. We actually closed them down. The biggest problem with bath salts is not so much the addictiveness, but the person becomes extremely paranoid, and we've had a couple cases where we've actually had people wander off into the woods, and we discover them usually in 2 cases too late, where they're trying to stay away from law enforcement because they're actually paranoid of having contact with anybody.
What about this phenomenon of suspects running up trees?
That was one recent case. In fact, I talked to the deputies on it, where they were involved in a chase, and the person got out of the vehicle and actually climbed, I'm almost sure they said 75 feet up into a tree, and eventually they coaxed him into coming down. We didn't cut the tree down.
Sergeant Feeley wanted to ask you your experience in dealing with suspects on bath salts.
Bath salts, I would agree with the sheriff on that. People's behavior on bath salts and bath salt products, it's very unpredictable. There's no typical behavior on bath salts other than to say it's very unpredictable. Unpredictable strength, unpredictable behaviors. The people that are on it are certainly, like the sheriff said, very paranoid. They put themselves at risk. They put other people at risk. And then it's a drug that seems to have some a craving with these people that they seek it out. I don't know what the addictive qualities of bath salts are, but in talking to people that have used it, they crave it. And I'm not sure what feeling or sensation they get from the use of bath salts, but the effects of bath salts are very unpredictable, and it's a very dangerous drug because of that.
What would you say is the worst substance for law enforcement to deal with in terms of resisting arrest and the officers getting punched or kicked or attacked?
I would say definitely, again, going back to bath salts or any type of drug that would make a person paranoid or very excitable or nervous, methamphetamine.
Sheriff Cole, you started the tip line and website in 2014. Sergeant Feeley, can you tell us your experience in terms of successes with this tip line?
Yeah, it's a very helpful thing to have a place where people can call. I think people in the listening area might be unsure of what to do. I know they observe things and they hear of things that they know are out of place in their communities, and I think there's an uncertainty. What do I do with this information? They might be reluctant to call 911. It's maybe not an emergent type matter, but it's information that they want to get to the police, and it's might not be something that they're aware of how to handle that information. So I think the tip line is very beneficial. It gives people a centralized place to call, report these things, and I encourage people to do so. And having said that, I just ask people to be patient with the information that they provide. It might just be a piece of a larger puzzle that might take some further investigation or some more information to take action on.
So if you get a call, don't expect the car in 5 minutes.
Right. I mean, the information they might call into the tip line might not require, or it might not be enough for an immediate response. But
it's not a 911 call.
Right. It's not. But understand that we are looking at it, and the sheriff is sharing that information very freely with the law enforcement community, and that's extremely helpful for our patrols to know, what information is out there, because they can add to it. It might ring a bell with one of the patrols, and it'll prompt some other inquiries and other information to come in. So,
can you tell us about the process of how the tips are used in law enforcement agencies?
It could be possible, especially if there was a future sale and an arrest made, where we could refer back to something that we got. But the important thing about the drug tip line is we put it on spreadsheets at the sheriff's office and share it with all police agencies, including the state police and the district attorney's office. Then we pick houses that we want to look at. In fact, right now on the drug tip line, I can tell you there's 40 to 50 some homes that have been identified to us selling illicit narcotics. And what we do is we work with the state police and assign 2 patrol cars to check these residences at a long period of time. I'm talking several hours at particular times that we note drug activities going on. And we also make sure we contact our undercover narcotics with the district attorney's office to make sure they're not already looking at the house. But this new program with the drug interdiction, we actually use patrol cars to actually watch residences. And we've closed down, like I say, a heroin house in Addison and a couple other places, meth lab in Lindley, and a bath salt house in Urbana with arrests from information.
And Sheriff, is it if suspects inside a drug house know they're being monitored, is that enough to shut the house down?
What happened with us in Addison, I always note, is in the village of Addison, we had a house with dealing heroin. We put some troopers and deputies over there. We made 3 arrests. We're not able to get the guy actually hid in the back of the house, would not answer the door. We talked to all the neighbors, and the next day he moved out of county. So we didn't arrest him, but he's gone. He knows we're not going to. We left a message with him that we were going to be back, and it shut that place right down.
Sergeant Jim Feeley, can you tell us some of the arrests that the state police have made as a result of the tips coming in?
Well, I believe the recent Glen Ave raid here in Hornell is the one that I can recall most recently, was certainly a result of the drug tip line information and some information developed by troopers and deputies just on road patrol. I had heard at the station level for some time about that location, and some of the frustration of my troopers and the deputies on the road, that they were well aware of this location before the raid took place. So I think the tip line was very crucial in getting what they needed to finally put a raid together on that location. That was a spot that had a lot of activity that was brought to the attention of our patrol. So I think the tip line was crucial in that case.
To what Sergeant Feeley said was, when I say I or we with the sheriff's office involved in a drug investigation, actually it is not us. There's always state police there with us. It's done cooperatively, and of course with the manpower shortages that both agencies have, we can't do it alone. So a lot of the things that I talk about, I really mean to include the state police. They are there with us.
Sheriff Cole, the Sheriff's Department's got 2 canines doing 7 days a week patrols. Can you tell us, where do they do that?
What we did was, when I came on board, they had 1 canine narcotics dog, and the Devin Snyder Memorial Foundation in Cohocton wanted to add a dog to our department, and they're paid for the dog, paid for the training, paid for the food and the vet bill, so it costs the taxpayer nothing. So we have our second dog, Devin, who is also a narcotics dog. And what I do is I schedule both dogs, so we have a dog working 7 days a week. So, for instance, on these drug interdiction stops, if a trooper or deputy stops the car to try to get into it, they can simply call a dog, and the dogs are used at a lot of traffic things. And additionally, we are starting to look at some of the interstates because there's a lot of traffic coming in from Binghamton and Rochester and Elmira. We're trying to get together with other police departments to identify some things we might want to look at on the interstates coming into Steuben County.
And I hear from a member of the Steuben County Legislature, Dan Farron, that you're trying to raise money to get a lot of publicity out there about the drug tip line, phone number, and website.
Right. I operate on a very stiff budget for manpower and all the other issues and equipment, things like that. So I've looked at some of these other agencies, like the American Legion had me over in Campbell last night for all the posts in Steuben County, and I sent a letter out today from my office. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get bumper stickers, street signs, road signs, and a program that actually the high school kids are developing on the drug tip line. I have some of the high schools in Steuben County developing information so that we can get out to the public what the drug tip line is, what the drug tip line web page is, so that we will get more information.
Sergeant Feeley, down to just a couple of minutes. Any final thoughts before we go?
I would just like to say our command staff is very pleased to work on this level with Sheriff Cole. He's ideally suited. His background, he's a former trooper, former sergeant with the state police. He's had a number of positions within the sheriff's department. He's worked for local police departments. He's been an SRO in the school system, and now a sheriff of the county. He's got an ideal perspective to put one of these initiatives together, and we're pleased as an agency that he's wants to work with us and include us in his investigation. I think it's critical in these times to work together and work towards a common goal. It's a pervasive problem, and I'm glad he's willing to partner with us and let us partner with him to work on this problem.
And Sheriff Cole, any final thoughts before we go?
No, just remember the drug tip line, 844-DRUG-TIP or 1-844-DRUG-TIP. It's www.drugtip.com.
The drug tip line is 844-DRUG-TIP. That's 844-DRUG-TIP. The website to make anonymous tips, www.844drugtip.com. 844drugtip.com. Sheriff Cole, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Sergeant Feeley, thank you for coming in.
All right, thanks for having me.